think that there's no charity in Quran? It's called the Al-Hajj. Read it in the 56th surah of Quran. There's no lack of translation. There's no mistranslation. There's no one shape says one thing. No, it's very clear. When you fight, you strike terror into the heart of the disbelievers.
There is virtually no attempt being made to prevent radical imams from addressing a literally captive audience and turning them into radical Islamists. And these aren't necessarily Muslims. These are people who are converted in prison.
About 18% on the last count of prisoners in New York State are Islamic.
The narrative of radical Islam would appeal to anybody locked up anywhere who feels that he has been unjustly treated by society. What's important to note is that, barring some other kinds of interventions in the prisons, this will grow. This will grow.
We're seeing thousands of inmates convert to Islam while they're in prison every year. And many of them, when they leave, go to religious communities like Islamburg. Not many people know this. For example, in upstate New York, there's a small community that, on the face of it, appears to be a faithful group of devotional Muslims. But when you look into it, you'll find a lot of very concerning activities going on there.
I was up there, and on the far east perimeter, you can see buses, like school buses and vehicles that are riddled with bullet marks.
Islamburg is one of 30 compounds in America of an organization called Jamaat al-Fukra. This organization actually has over 3,000 members and is made up mostly of individuals that converted to Islam while they were in American prisons.
What is Islamburg? Is there two faces? Is it a goodwill face to show the community and then a second backdoor face? And that's really what my concerns are.
You hear gunfire when you go past there. You know, at night you do hear people screaming and yelling, and there has been people that have left the compound that have told us information about some of the stuff that they've done.
What's most concerning to me is that these compounds are actually run by an individual by the name of Sheikh Jilani, and Jamaat al-Fukra is actually an organization out of Pakistan which has been connected to a number of terrorist activities.
Jilani is tied to dozens of crimes across this country, firebombings and assassinations.
In keeping with the deceptive nature of these groups, Sheikh Jilani produced a video which is intended to paint himself and his groups in a positive light.
The American Muslims are better off in America than anywhere else, and they will never do anything wrong against their country. That's my directive to you and to them.
But authorities have uncovered another video by Jilani. And this one was never intended to be seen by the public.
See the film and see how, struggle against oppression has to be carried on.
This video shows terror training, ambush tactics, and how to make bombs.
Don't make any complex film so that it may not fall in the hands of the enemies of Islam, and it can quite serious.
And one has to wonder, is this what Jilani's followers are learning here in the compounds in America?
We are not given any authorization of anything that you have filmed today. We're not given any authorization for that to be publicized whatsoever. Well, legally, we are not. That is the law. You have to ask permission.
Well, I'm not on your property. I'm on the public road here.
I know the FBI and Homeland Security are monitoring groups like Al-Fukra very closely, but it's amazing to me that this story just hasn't gotten out, and the media hasn't even begun to uncover what's being taught in these compounds and where Muslims like this get their ideas. And the only way we're going to win this war is to begin to uncover groups like Al-Fukra. We We've already seen in Europe a number of severe terror attacks.
The explosion blew the top deck apart, the roof sheared off.
And many other attacks have been thwarted by their authorities.
You're looking at an attempted suicide bomb attack, not in Iraq, but Glasgow Airport.
What we're seeing in Europe are both the cultural and violent jihad strategies at play, which is why many believe Europe is on the verge of a breakdown.
Britain is in a state of denial, as is much of Europe, and to a certain extent America too. A state of denial about the nature and extent, but particularly the nature of the threats that we're up against.
We are not Muslims living within the UK who are simply here to integrate and become part and parcel of democracy and freedom and adopt these values. Rather, what we hope to do is to engage within British society, to call to the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one day, inshallah, implement the Sharia over man-made law, and inshallah over Downing Street and Washington itself.
A recent survey of Muslims shows that 30% would rather live under Sharia law than democracy. 28% would like to see Great Britain become an Islamic state, and an overwhelming majority, 81%, consider themselves Muslim first and British second.
A very significant proportion of British Muslims do not accept the terms of settlement accepted by all other immigrant communities, which is that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Britain, you observe British law. You don't expect British law to change to accommodate Islamic law. On the contrary, they do expect British law to change to accommodate Sharia law, and that is the big difference.
Rather than the Muslims adopting British values, why are you not adopting our values? Why you believe that the British values are superior over the Islamic values?
This creeping Sharia is the biggest threat to Western freedom. These small incremental concessions that you make for so-called multicultural reasons are regarded by the other side as enormous victories. And Piglet on your desk is no longer acceptable. And the Burger King ice cream swirl is no longer acceptable. And the shirt that the Milan Football Club wears when it plays games is no longer acceptable. I think those kind of concessions, the concessions made in the Danish cartoon case, they all go the same way. A non-Muslim exercises his right of freedom of expression. He does something that would be regarded as perfectly normal. And the Muslims object. Those objections are often accompanied by death threats, vandalism, and oftentimes even actual deaths too. How does the state react? The state generally reacts the same way, by regretting that the original non-Muslims ever did anything in the first place, and calling for us to all be more considerate about where we draw the line.
Across the Arab world, there's been outrage at the publication of cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The Prime Minister of Denmark has appeared on Arab television in a desperate attempt to calm the situation.
It's all very moderate, moderate, moderate. But what it means is that you're drawing the line tighter and tighter and tighter around your own freedom of expression.
When you call out for the silencing of cartoonists or for censoring the press, then you are touching on fundamental freedoms that we all believe in.
Muslims don't want to see representations of Muhammad. That's fine, fine, good for them. But I'm not a Muslim. And if I want to draw Muhammad, I don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to.
Insulting the Prophet is obviously an offense. But in the past, Islamic law was only concerned with such offenses in Muslim countries. Whatever happens in the lands of the infidels outside the jurisdiction of a Muslim state is not the concern of Muslim law. The only explanation I can think of is that they now consider Europe part of the House of Islam.
All these incremental things are actually the real battleground and where we'll lose this thing.
There is another factor in the Islamists' favour, which is sheer demographic weight of numbers. There are now many millions of Muslims in Britain and Europe.
Do you know which name is more popular right now in Great Britain? George or Mohammed? George? Wrong. No, it's Mohammed.
Essentially, we live in a world where the most advanced societies are going out of business. In Spain, they have an upside-down family tree. You have 4 grandparents who have 2 children who have 1 grandchild. You do that for another 20, 30, 40 years, they're not going to be any more Spaniards.
Most of the countries in Western Europe are in the process of becoming Muslim-majority countries. The proportion of Muslims in the population is increasing